The unexpected encounter. Tom navigated the crowded corridors of the interstellar market, his senses assaulted by a cacophony of alien languages and the rich, spicy aromas of 100 worlds. The market sprawled across the central deck of the Harmony space station, a bustling nexus for trade and diplomacy in the neutral zone between star systems. He paused at a stall, his hands filled with packages of food supplies destined for the less fortunate residents of the station. As he handed out packets of dried nutrients, a figure caught his eye. A young girl with luminous skin and delicate, ethereal features typical of the Kythera species. She stood slightly apart from the crowd, her large, expressive eyes scanning the market stalls with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Hey, need a hand with those?" called a voice from behind him. Tom turned to find his colleague, a burly man named Rick, who grinned as he approached with a trolley. "Thanks, Rick. It's busy today," Tom replied, loading the last of the food packets onto the trolley. He glanced back at the girl. "I've never seen one of the Kythera up close. They usually keep to their own kind." "Yeah, they're a mysterious bunch. But look at her. Doesn't seem like she's got much," Rick observed, nodding towards the girl. Tom approached her, holding out the last item he had, a chocolate bar. It was a simple thing, yet rare enough in this corner of the galaxy to be a treat. "Hi there," he said gently. "Would you like this? We're here to help." The girl looked up at him, her eyes widening slightly. "For me?" she asked, her voice a melodic whisper. She seemed unsure, her gaze flickering between Tom and the chocolate. "Absolutely," Tom smiled encouragingly. "It's just a chocolate bar, but it's yours if you want it." She hesitated for a moment before accepting the chocolate with a graceful nod. "Thank you," she murmured. "I am Lyra." "I'm Tom, and this is Rick," Tom introduced. Rick waved from behind the trolley. "Lyra, that's a beautiful name. Are you here with family?" Tom asked, genuinely interested. Lyra shook her head. "No, I am here to observe. I got separated from my group." Tom and Rick exchanged a quick look. "Well, you're welcome to stick with us while you find them," Tom offered. "We're just handing out supplies, but afterward, we could help you look for your group." Lyra's face brightened at the offer. "I would appreciate that, thank you, Tom." As they moved through the market together, Tom handed out the last of the supplies while Lyra stayed close, observing the interactions with a keen interest. Rick chatted amiably, trying to draw her into conversation. "So, Lyra, what's it like? Kythera? We hear stories, but stories change in the telling," Rick said, as they paused to let a group of rowdy Ulix traders pass. "It is peaceful," Lyra replied, a slight smile touching her lips. "We value knowledge and harmony with nature. But I am here to learn about other cultures, other ways of life." "That's an honorable pursuit," Tom responded, impressed by her maturity and poise. As the afternoon wore on, the trio made their way through the bustling market, with Lyra growing increasingly comfortable with her new companions. Tom realized there was much more to this alien girl than met the eye, and he was looking forward to discovering just who she really was. Chapter 2. The Girl from Kythera. After finishing their rounds at the market, Tom, Rick, and Lyra found themselves at a small cafe tucked away in a quieter section of the Harmony space station. The cafe, a favorite among the human staff for its robust coffee and views of the docking bays, offered a cozy retreat from the bustling market. "So, Lyra," Tom began as they seated themselves at a corner table with their drinks. "What brings a Kythera to a place like this all alone? It's not common to see your people out here without a delegation." Lyra took a careful sip of her hot beverage, her eyes thoughtful. "I am here on a sort of educational mission," she explained. "My people value knowledge above all, and I was chosen to learn about other cultures firsthand. It's part of my training." Rick raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Training? Are you some kind of diplomat or scholar then?" "In a way," Lyra replied with a slight nod. "I am in training to be one of our cultural liaisons. This mission is a part of my final evaluation." "That's quite the responsibility for someone so young," Tom observed, impressed by her composure and sense of purpose. Lyra smiled, looking out the window at the stars speeding by. It is, but I believe it's important. Understanding each other can only help our civilizations coexist more peacefully. Changing the subject, Rick leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. So, what's been the most surprising thing you've found about human cultures so far? Lyra laughed softly, the sound like music. Your food, she admitted. It's so varied. Back home, our meals are quite nutritional but not very diverse. Here, every stall in the market offers something different. Tom chuckled. Wait until you try some of our desserts. Speaking of which, you have to try the chocolate cake here. It's out of this world. I would like that, Lyra said, her eyes lighting up. As Tom waved over a server to order the cake, Rick turned the conversation to more personal topics. And what about family, Lyra? Do you miss them? I do, she admitted, her gaze distant. But they are proud of what I am doing. We communicate through messages as often as we can. The server brought the chocolate cake, and Tom offered Lyra the first piece. She tasted it tentatively, then her face lit up with delight. This is wonderful. Chocolate is new to me, but I think I love it. Laughing, Tom nodded. I thought you might. Everyone loves chocolate. As they enjoyed the dessert, the conversation flowed from lighthearted topics to more serious discussions about the challenges facing their respective peoples. Tom and Rick shared their experiences working with various alien species, and Lyra listened intently, absorbing every detail. It seems we all have much to learn from each other, Tom mused, looking between Rick and Lyra. Maybe this cafe, this small moment, is the beginning of something bigger. I hope so, Lyra responded earnestly. Perhaps it can be a symbol of what we can achieve together. As they left the cafe, the station's artificial night beginning to dim into a simulated dawn, Lyra felt a newfound sense of belonging. With Tom and Rick by her side, she was ready to face the rest of her mission with a renewed vigor, hopeful about what her new friendships might bring to her and her people. Chapter 3: Bonds of Culture. The following day, Tom decided to take Lyra on a tour of the Harmony Space Station's cultural exhibits. The station, a hub of interstellar diplomacy, housed an expansive library and museum dedicated to the arts, history, and sciences of the various member species. Joined by Rick, the trio made their way to the library first, where holographic books floated in mid-air, accessible with a simple gesture. This is the human section, Tom explained, guiding Lyra through rows of hovering holograms that displayed texts and multimedia from Earth's many cultures. History, literature, music. We've tried to represent as much as we can hear. Lyra reached out, her hand passing through a hologram, triggering it to expand into a large, vivid display of the Amazon rainforest. This is beautiful, she remarked, her voice filled with wonder. Is it true that much of Earth's flora and fauna are unique in the galaxy? Absolutely, Rick chimed in, always eager to share about Earth. Our biodiversity is something we're really proud of. They moved on to the museum section, where artifacts and replicas from different human eras were displayed. Tom pointed to a model of the Roman Colosseum. Our ancestors built this thousands of years ago. It was a place for public spectacles, sports, and performances. Lyra listened intently, absorbing every detail as Tom and Rick shared anecdotes and historical facts. She was particularly taken with a display of traditional musical instruments from around the world. Music seems to be a universal language, she observed, touching a replica of a sitar gently. It is, Tom agreed. It's one of the ways we express our emotions and stories. Do the Kithara have similar instruments? We do, Lyra replied. Our instruments are primarily designed to harmonize with natural sounds on Kithara, like the wind and the water. Intrigued, Rick suggested, you should show us some time. I bet it's fascinating. I'd like that, Lyra said, smiling. The afternoon progressed with more explorations and discussions. At each exhibit, Lyra asked thoughtful questions, demonstrating her deep commitment to her mission of understanding and learning. Tom and Rick, in turn, found themselves viewing their own culture through fresh eyes, appreciating nuances they had previously taken for granted. As the station's artificial sun began to set, casting warm hues through the large viewing windows. The trio found themselves at a cafe overlooking the docking bays. They sat down, each with a steaming cup of coffee, reflecting on the day. "I've learned so much today," Lyra started, her eyes bright with excitement. "I had read about human cultures, but seeing these artifacts and hearing your stories, it's much more impactful." Tom nodded, pleased. It's one thing to read about other cultures, but another to experience them, even if it's through exhibits like these. "And we've learned from you too," Rick added. "Hearing about Kithra's ways, it reminds me that there's so much out there we don't know." Lyra looked out toward the stars, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps understanding each other's cultures is the first step towards a greater harmony among all species." "That's a beautiful thought," Tom said. "And maybe one day, we'll add Kithra's history and culture to our exhibits here." Lyra turned to them, a hopeful look in her eyes. "I would like that very much." As they finished their drinks, the bonds formed over shared stories and mutual curiosity had drawn them closer, not just as diplomatic acquaintances, but as friends who had begun to bridge the vast expanse between their worlds with understanding and respect. Chapter 4, A Gesture of Peace. Tom adjusted the collar of his jacket as he and Rick walked toward the Grand Hall of Harmony Space Station. Tonight was the diplomatic event Lyra had invited them to, a formal gathering hosted by the Kithra delegation. Tom had attended his fair share of interspecies events, but he had never been to one organized by the Kithra. "You sure about this, Tom?" Rick muttered as they approached the entrance. "I mean, it's one thing showing her around the station, but these people are high-level diplomats. We're just two guys who haul crates and hand out supplies." Tom smirked. "First of all, we do more than that, and second, Lyra wanted us here. I figure if she's willing to vouch for us, we might as well show up and see what this is all about." The Grand Hall was unlike anything Tom had seen before. Instead of rigidly arranged tables and formal decorations, the space had been transformed into an almost ethereal garden. Bioluminescent plants from Kithra's homeworld glowed softly, casting a calming blue-green hue over the room. Water-like projections floated in the air, shifting and dancing with the movements of the guests. "Lotta effort for a meet and greet," Rick murmured. Tom nudged him. "Just try not to embarrass yourself." Before Rick could respond, Lyra appeared, moving gracefully toward them. Tonight, she wore flowing fabric adorned with faint silver patterns that seemed to shift as she walked. Her eyes brightened as she greeted them. "You came," she said, sounding genuinely pleased. "Wouldn't miss it," Tom replied. Rick nodded. "Gotta say, this is impressive. Never been to a diplomatic event that felt this peaceful." Lyra smiled. "Kithra gatherings are meant to encourage understanding and connection. We believe atmosphere influences conversation." "Well, it's working," Tom admitted, taking in the serene surroundings. A group of Kithra diplomats approached, their robes shimmering under the soft lights. One of them, an older male with a regal posture, inclined his head toward Lyra. "I see you have brought guests." "Yes," Lyra responded. "Tom and Rick have been my guides here on Harmony. They have shown me much of human culture and have helped me understand your people in ways that words alone cannot." The elder studied Tom and Rick for a moment before speaking. "It is rare for outsiders to be invited into our gatherings, but I trust Lyra's judgment. Enjoy yourselves." As the elder moved on, Rick let out a breath. "That felt like an inspection." Lyra chuckled. "It was. But you passed." As the evening continued, Tom and Rick did their best to blend in. They engaged in conversations with Kithra diplomats, discussing everything from human music to interstellar trade. Tom found himself surprisingly comfortable, thanks to Lyra's presence. She guided them through the customs, explaining gestures and phrases that held meaning in Kithra interactions. At one point, Lyra led Tom to a table where small bowls of a glowing blue liquid were set. "This is a traditional drink of my people," she explained. "It is shared as a sign of goodwill. Would you like to try?" Tom eyed the liquid. "Is it strong?" Lyra gave him an amused look. "Not in the way human drinks are. It heightens awareness rather than dulling it." Tom picked up a bowl. All right, let's do this. They clinked their bowls together before taking a sip. The taste was unlike anything Tom had ever had, cool, slightly sweet, with a strange sensation that lingered on his tongue. You weren't kidding, he said. Feels like my senses just got turned up a notch. Lyra laughed softly. That is the idea. Nearby, Rick was deep in conversation with a group of Kithra scholars, gesturing animatedly as he explained the mechanics of human humor. Tom shook his head. I think he's enjoying himself. Lyra followed his gaze. Your friend is lively. Tom chuckled. That's one way to put it. For a moment, they simply stood there, watching the gathering unfold. The mix of humans and Kithra speaking, laughing, exchanging ideas, it was the kind of thing that didn't happen often in the vastness of space. Lyra turned to Tom. I am glad you came tonight. Your presence has made this gathering more meaningful to me. Tom met her gaze, noting the sincerity in her voice. Same here. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I've learned a lot tonight. She tilted her head slightly. Then perhaps we are both fulfilling our missions, learning from one another. Tom smiled. I think so. As the night continued, Tom realized that this evening was more than just a diplomatic function. It was a step toward something bigger, something he hadn't quite put into words yet. But one thing was clear. He wanted to see where this connection with Lyra would lead. Chapter 5: Closer Encounters. The gentle hum of the station's atmospheric systems filled the air as Tom and Rick made their way toward Lyra's quarters. It had become something of a ritual now. After the day's duties were done, they would gather in her modest living space to share stories and insights. While Tom was always curious to learn more about the Kithra way of life, Rick had grown fascinated by the little rituals and technologies that Lyra introduced them to. When they arrived, Lyra greeted them with a warm smile, stepping aside to let them in. Her quarters were simple yet elegant. The walls were lined with translucent panels that glowed faintly, casting the room in a soft, shifting light. A small table in the center held a few objects that Lyra used as teaching tools. A crystalline sphere that displayed shifting star maps, a set of delicate instruments that emitted harmonic tones, and a curious device that seemed to translate Kithra language into holographic symbols. Come in, Lyra said. I have something new to show you. What's the lesson today? Rick joked, dropping into one of the low, cushioned seats by the table. Tom followed, giving Lyra a curious look. I thought you might enjoy learning about our music, she said, sitting gracefully across from them. She picked up a slim, metallic instrument resembling a flute, its surface adorned with intricate patterns. This is called a norai. It is one of our oldest instruments, and each one is unique. It is tuned not only to produce sound, but also to resonate with the player's energy. Tom raised an eyebrow. Sounds pretty advanced for a flute. Lyra smiled. It is not just a flute. It is a tool for expression, for connecting with the environment and the people around you. She held the norai up, and a series of soft, lilting notes filled the room, blending harmoniously with the ambient light. That's beautiful, Tom said. Is it hard to play? It can be, Lyra admitted. But once you find your connection to it, it becomes an extension of yourself. She handed the norai to Tom. Try it. Tom hesitated, then held the instrument carefully, his fingers sliding over the cool surface. He attempted a note, and though it wasn't as smooth as Lyra's, the sound was clear and gentle. Rick snorted. Not bad, maestro. My turn. He grabbed the norai and gave it a go, producing a warbling sound that made Lyra giggle. All right, maybe I'm more of a listener, Rick admitted, handing it back. Lyra's laughter was light and infectious, and Tom found himself smiling. You said it resonates with the player's energy. What does that mean, exactly? It is difficult to explain, Lyra said thoughtfully. The norai responds to the subtleties of your physical and emotional state. In a sense, it becomes a reflection of your inner harmony. Rick leaned back, rubbing his chin. Makes me wonder what kind of energy I've got, if that's what I sounded like. Perhaps you need more practice, Lyra said playfully. They continued talking late into the evening, the conversation flowing naturally. Lyra explained more about Kithra traditions, how their spirituality intertwined with science, and how they viewed relationships as a balance of mutual growth. In turn, Tom and Rick shared tales of their own cultures, the challenges humanity had faced in adapting to life among the stars, and the quirks of human bonding rituals. At one point, Lyra showed them another artifact, a small, circular device that created a holographic image of her home planet's night sky. Tom gazed at the swirling constellations, captivated. "It's amazing how different it looks from here." Lyra nodded. "Every star you see holds a story, a piece of our history. This is what I want to share, not just with you, but with everyone here on the station." "You're doing a good job of it," Tom said earnestly. "And I think it's safe to say you've got 2 new fans of Kithra culture. 3 if we count my horrible flute skills," Rick added, grinning. Lyra's smile widened. "Then I am glad. And I hope you will share more of your culture with me as well. I still have much to learn about humanity." Tom felt a warm sense of connection as he met Lyra's gaze. "We've got a lot to share, but honestly, I think we've learned just as much from you." Rick raised his cup. "To learning from each other." They all touched their cups together in a quiet gesture of camaraderie, the room aglow with both the soft light of Lyra's artifacts and the growing friendship that had brought them all closer. Chapter 6. The Revelation. Lyra had asked them to meet her at the central hub of the Harmony space station. The space was a marvel of design, with its vast, open atrium ringed by observation windows that offered a stunning view of the surrounding galaxy. Though Tom and Rick were used to the station's grandeur, it always took a moment to fully absorb the sight of stars scattered across the black void. When they arrived, Lyra was already there, standing at one of the windows. She turned as they approached, her expression both serious and expectant. She greeted them with a slight nod. "Thank you for coming. I have something important to share." "Sounds serious," Rick said, his tone half-joking. "What's going on?" Lyra hesitated, her hands clasped in front of her. "There are things I have not told you. About who I am, about why I'm truly here." Tom glanced at Rick, who raised an eyebrow. "All right," Tom said. "We're listening." Lyra motioned for them to sit at a nearby bench. Once they were seated, she took a deep breath. "My people value privacy and discretion. When I said I was here to learn, that was true. But I left out that my mission is part of a larger responsibility. I am not just a student. I am being prepared to become one of the Kithra's cultural leaders, a role that involves guiding our relations with other species." Rick whistled softly. "That's no small role." Tom leaned forward. "So you're not just here to learn about humans. You're here to determine how we fit into the Kithra's plans for the future." "Essentially, yes," Lyra admitted. "I wanted to tell you earlier, but I needed to be sure I could trust you. This role is sensitive. If others knew who I truly was, it could influence how they interact with me." Rick leaned back, rubbing his chin. "And you think we're trustworthy?" "I know you are," Lyra said simply. Tom thought for a moment, then nodded. "All right, Lyra. Thanks for telling us. But why now?" Lyra glanced toward the windows, where a cargo ship was slowly docking. "Because things are changing. The Kithra Council will soon review my findings, and I'll need to present a comprehensive understanding of humanity. I want you to be a part of that process." "You mean us?" Rick asked, looking slightly surprised. "We're just regular guys. What can we contribute?" Lyra smiled softly. "You are not just regular. You have shown me humanity's creativity, compassion, and curiosity. You have lived your culture, not just spoken of it. That is invaluable." Tom shrugged. "Well, when you put it like that, sure, we'll help." "Good," Lyra said, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "There is one more thing. I need you to accompany me to a meeting with a Kithra delegation arriving tomorrow. They will be key in determining whether the council accepts my proposals." Rick grinned. "Another fancy diplomatic event. Huh? Do we need to wear anything special?" "No," Lyra replied with a small laugh. "Just be yourselves. Your authenticity is what matters." Tom and Rick exchanged a glance. Guess we're in, Tom said. Anything else we need to know? Lyra shook her head. Not for now. Just, thank you. I have grown to value your perspectives more than I can say. Rick clapped a hand on Tom's shoulder. Looks like we've got our work cut out for us, buddy. Tom nodded, looking at Lyra. We'll be there. As they left the hub, the weight of Lyra's revelation hung in the air. For Tom, it was a reminder of how much their relationship had deepened. It was no longer just a casual friendship formed on the station. This was something larger. And while he didn't fully understand where it might lead, he knew one thing for certain. He would stand by Lyra, no matter what the coming days brought. Chapter 7, Trials and Trust. The following day, Tom and Rick made their way to the meeting chamber where Lyra's Kithra delegation was scheduled to arrive. The room was unlike the open, fluid design of the central hub. Here, the walls were made of smooth, reflective panels that gave the impression of an infinite expanse. The furniture was arranged in a circular fashion, creating an intimate yet formal setting. Lyra was already there when they entered. She stood near the center of the chamber, speaking softly with another Kithra, a woman whose taller stature and intricate attire marked her as someone of importance. As soon as Tom and Rick stepped in, Lyra turned and offered a smile, though it was tinged with visible tension. You made it, she said, stepping toward them. Wouldn't miss it, Rick replied. Though I have to admit, this place is intimidating. Tom glanced around. Yeah, it's definitely not what we're used to. Lyra nodded. This is a space designed for significant discussions. The atmosphere is meant to encourage focus. Rick leaned toward Tom. Fancy way of saying no distractions, he murmured, earning a slight grin from Tom. Before Lyra could respond, the chamber doors glided open. A group of Kithra entered, their movements synchronized and deliberate. At the head was an older male with silver patterns tracing his skin, a clear sign of rank. His expression was unreadable as his gaze swept over Tom and Rick, finally settling on Lyra. Lyra, he said, his voice calm but authoritative. These are the humans you've spoken of? Yes, honored Varen, Lyra replied with a respectful bow. Tom and Rick have been invaluable in helping me understand human culture. They are here at my request. Varen's expression remained neutral. You speak highly of them. I hope they live up to your words. Rick cleared his throat. Well, we'll do our best. We're just here to help however we can. Tom gave a polite nod. We've gotten to know Lyra, and we're happy to share what we can about humanity. Varen studied them for a moment longer, then gestured toward the seating area. Let us begin. They took their places in the circle, with Lyra sitting between Tom and Rick. The meeting started with formal introductions, each Kithra stating their name and position. When it was Lyra's turn, she spoke with a clear voice that carried a mix of confidence and vulnerability. I am Lyra, a candidate for the role of cultural liaison. My time here has been spent learning about human traditions, values, and behaviors. I believe that our species can form a more meaningful partnership if we approach each other with openness and understanding. Varen nodded. And what have you learned from these two humans? Lyra glanced at Tom and Rick before answering. I have learned that humanity's strength lies in its diversity. Their creativity, their ability to adapt to different situations, and their willingness to build connections beyond their own kind are qualities we can learn from. Another member of the delegation, a woman named Saren, leaned forward. It is one thing to observe, but can you provide specific examples of how these qualities will benefit our people? Lyra hesitated, and Tom saw the faintest hint of uncertainty flicker across her face. Before she could respond, Rick spoke up. If I can jump in, he said, drawing the attention of the entire room. I think one example is how we approach collaboration. Back on Earth, we had to work with a ton of different cultures, languages, and perspectives to solve global issues. That kind of problem-solving isn't easy, but it forces us to think creatively and find common ground. Tom followed Rick's lead. And on the station here, we've worked side by side with folks from dozens of species. It's not always smooth, but we figure it out. That kind of experience could be useful if the Kithra want to work more closely with other species in the galaxy. The room fell silent for a moment. Varen's gaze shifted between Lyra and the two men, his expression contemplative. "You make an interesting point," Varen said at last. "Lyra, it seems your time with these humans has provided you with valuable insights. However, the Council will need to see more than words. We will need actions that demonstrate these ideas in practice." Lyra inclined her head. "I understand, honored Varen. I will prepare a detailed proposal for the Council, showing how the Kithara can apply what I have learned." Varen rose from his seat, signaling the end of the meeting. "Very well. The Council will convene soon. Ensure that your proposal is thorough." The delegation filed out, leaving Lyra, Tom, and Rick alone in the chamber. Lyra let out a small sigh and turned to them. "Thank you," she said softly. "You didn't have to speak, but what you said, it helped." Rick shrugged. "Hey, we're in this together, right?" Tom nodded. "You've been honest with us. The least we can do is back you up." Lyra's expression softened. "It means more to me than I can say." They left the chamber together, walking back to Lyra's quarters to plan their next steps. Though the meeting had been tense, Tom felt a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just helping Lyra. They were building something that might change the way humans and Kithara saw each other. Chapter 8. A Future Together. The new garden was unlike anything Tom had seen on Harmony before. Where once a cold, utilitarian stretch of the station's deck had dominated, now there was a serene oasis. The project had been Lyra's idea, a dedicated space for interspecies gatherings that celebrated collaboration. With the help of a combined human and Kithara team, they transformed the area into a lush indoor arboretum, filled with exotic plants from both Earth and Kithara's homeworld. Tom and Rick stood at the entrance, taking in the soft glow of bioluminescent Kithara flora and the familiar green of Earth's ferns and flowering bushes. The garden stretched out before them, crisscrossed with pathways and punctuated by clear panels that framed breathtaking views of the stars. "Not bad," Rick said, nudging Tom with his elbow. "Think we'll get a bench named after us?" "Let's just hope the place stays intact," Tom replied, grinning. "Feels good to see it finally finished." Their quiet appreciation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Lyra approached, her usual calm demeanor touched with a hint of excitement. She wore a light, flowing garment adorned with subtle silver accents, traditional Kithara attire that seemed to shimmer faintly under the garden's lighting. "It's good to see you both here," she said, her voice warm. "We wouldn't miss it," Tom said. "This is incredible, Lyra. You pulled it off." Lyra tilted her head modestly. "We all did. Without your support, both of you, this would have been just an idea. But you helped bring it to life." Rick gestured around. "Looks like we're about to have company. Lots of people showing up." Indeed, small groups of humans and Kithara were already making their way into the garden, mingling among the pathways and gathering around the central fountain. It was the first official event in the new space, and the turnout was already impressive. "Should we, mingle?" Rick asked, looking a bit unsure. "Or is it better if we stay out of the way?" "Come with me," Lyra said, motioning them toward a small seating area. "There are some people I'd like you to meet." They followed her to a spot where a few Kithara representatives and human station officials were already engaged in conversation. Lyra introduced them, and soon Tom and Rick found themselves in the middle of a lively discussion about the challenges and rewards of interspecies cooperation. As the evening wore on, the garden buzzed with activity. Everywhere Tom looked, humans and Kithara were talking, sharing stories, and even laughing together. The project wasn't just a garden. It had become a living symbol of what could be achieved when two very different species worked together. At one point, Lyra guided Tom and Rick away from the main gathering to a quieter corner near the fountain. She seemed more relaxed now, the tension of the past few days finally lifting. "I want to thank you both," she said. "Not just for helping me here, but for everything. You've given me a perspective I wouldn't have had otherwise." Rick scratched the back of his neck. "Hey, we didn't do that much. Just talked, showed you around." "That was more than enough," Lyra replied. "You taught me what it means to connect on a personal level. It's something that's hard to find in diplomacy." Tom leaned against a low railing, watching her as she spoke. So what happens next? For you, I present my findings to the council, Lyra said, and I hope they'll see the value in continuing these efforts. This garden is just the beginning. And if they don't? Rick asked, his tone serious. Then I keep trying, Lyra said firmly. But I believe they will. This evening proves that people, humans and Kithara, want this. They want to understand each other. The three of them stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the small groups scattered throughout the garden. The mingling, the shared laughter, the quiet conversations. It was exactly what they had hoped for when they first envisioned the project. Rick stretched, breaking the silence. Well, I'm starving. Any chance there's food somewhere in this fancy new garden? Lyra chuckled. There are refreshments near the main entrance. Help yourself. Rick gave her a mock salute and headed off, leaving Tom and Lyra alone by the fountain. Tom turned to Lyra. This is something you should be proud of. You made a real difference. You helped, she reminded him. I guess I did, Tom said, smiling. But it was your vision that made it happen. They stood together, the faint sound of the fountain blending with the soft hum of conversation around them. The stars outside the station shone brighter than ever. But for Tom, the most luminous thing in the garden was standing right next to him. In that moment, it felt like the beginning of something even greater.